Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Talking About the Big Stuff podcast. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cole, and I'm with my co host, Matthew Cravat.
That would be me.
Yes. And that is the cleanest take I've ever done on Welcome to the Big. Oh, see, right now I'm
See,
doing it.
see, you knew the name of your podcast for a minute, and now you
Yep.
forgot the name of your podcast.
It's funny because I've done a bunch of guest spots on my friend Paul's podcast, The World's Best Podcast. And he starts off with "Welcome everybody to the world's best podcast," and for whatever reason, it's like my intro, like that's the intro in my head before I go every time. Is that so? All right, so let's get started. So you were in France. How was France?
France was fine. I was I got a new name in France.
Oh,
Yeah, instead of Matthew, my name is now Matthew
nice.
because the events people said, Matthew, you're an actor. You're not afraid of being on stage. I said, this is true. So can you introduce the newcomers to the group every morning for the 3-day meeting? So anyone who's joined since last year and
Yeah.
wasn't at the last meeting. And he asked me to do it like you know, and my friend Sebastian said, "Can you do it like the men from the boxing in Las Vegas?"
Hmm.
And so I said, oh, I guess it's a let's get ready to. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this trademarked, but our word guy, and that's a trademark.
Not
But I
not
said,
our
yeah,
word. that's
yeah, not
that's
that our
different.
word, that's a different one. But he doesn't bumble and he doesn't tumble. Uh, but I was like, yeah, sure. And the first day I did that, but then it hurt my throat a lot, and so I kind of switched over towards more of a wrestling type announcer, which was more fun for me anyway. And I was like kind of making jokes with each person. And by the last day, I just did the Road Dogs entrance. I was like, it's me, the MATT, but through the days, people were just yelling Matthew at me the way I was yelling people's names when I introduced them.
Nice.
Yeah, work meetings with France are going to be difficult now. I've got
Yeah.
a reputation.
Yeah.
Fine.
Sorry.
Fine. Bullshit. Fine. Hair is fine.
Yeah. All right.
George Carlin routine.
Yeah. No, I'm well versed on my Carlin. Yesterday we were talking at work. We were talking about papers in college, and I said, my trick to doing well on papers was if you write a paper on a subject that you really like in your class, you're gonna do better. But also a lot of times it will make it more interesting. So I had a speech class that I took, and we had to do a paper on a famous speech, and I went and I asked the professor, and I was like, "Hey, can I do the 7 words you
Seven
can't say
words you
on
can't say on
TV?"
television.
And the professor was like, "Why? Like, it's not really a speech; it's stand up." And I was like, "Well, it's there's a Supreme Court case around it, and it's a pretty landmark case as far as like obscenity law and things like that, and it's quoted specifically. It's not like it's not it's kind of about that, but it's not really like it's very specifically about that routine." And so she let me do it. And so I was telling my coworkers this at lunch, and they were like, what are the 7 words you can't say on TV? And I was like, shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. And I said it
Wait, tits
fast.
doesn't belong on that list.
No, it doesn't. But I said it really fast like that, and they were like, "Oh, you've said it before," and I'm like, "No, that's the rhythm with which he says it." Like nobody knew what I was talking about,
uh,
and I was like,
I,
"Shit,
I
piss,
would have to
so
quit.
shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits." And I was like, and sometimes on the second version, which is I think the one that the second version's what they did the filthy words routine. That was the main part of that lawsuit for the Supreme Court case. What they added fart, turd, and twat at the end, and I said, but fart, turd, and twat, he admits you can say on TV, but nobody wants to.
I would
Yeah,
have
it
to quit
was.
that job if nobody knew the 7 words. I gotta leave.
Yeah, no, I
I
like my
used to have a.
coworkers.
I had a poster that I got at a George Carlin concert in Raleigh. Oh, I think before the boys were born, even so, more than 25 years ago.
Yeah,
That was like a close up of his face, with his hand in front of his face, thoughtfully as he does, angrily and thoughtfully at the same time as he does, or did. And then over it were like, I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like 1,149 filthy words and phrases.
Yeah.
And it was like category, different words for penis, and then category, different words for male masturbation, different words
Yeah.
for vagina, different words for female masturbation. It was just the whole poster size thing was just in like 12-point font, every whole 11,000 different dirty words and phrases.
Nice.
I took it down after Jacob was getting old enough to be able to read. And you could edit all that out and no one would ever know because none of it's relevant.
No, I kind of think. I mean, I think freedom of speech is a great example of what we're about to talk about,
It
and so
is.
I was aware of that when we started talking about it. But
Yeah.
so today's topic that we're going to talk about is it what we talked about it last on the last episode, minding your own business, and specifically in a morality policing kind of way, like in ways that don't harm others, and I mean tangibly harm others. Like obvious, I don't mean like, oh, it hurts my feelings that you're gay, even though like like you're my kid, it hurts my feelings that you're gay. Like no, that's not real. I'm talking about like, oh, you have a predilection for flesh and you are a cannibal. Like that is something that's harmful to
Mm,
others. Okay, so that's the topic that we're going to talk about is morality policing. This idea of it's one thing to have your own set of morality or your own morality, and it's another thing to try to not only to impose it but to shame others. We talked about slut shaming as an example when we talked about this.
yeah, I mean, so we talked a little earlier today that we were going to have this conversation. So I started thinking about morality in general, and I do believe, I've been convinced that there is some level of moral realism, objectively moral and immoral things that exist, that can be proven true or false. It's like, objectively true that this is always a moral thing that everyone should have to obey at all times. It may not be something that's scientifically provable. It's philosophy, so you have to debate it. But I watched an hour-long presentation about this, and the hour-long presentation was not necessary. A kind of a you had me at hello moment was in the introduction. The philosopher said the Holocaust was objectively wrong and there's
Yeah.
no justifying it. And I'm like, okay, you have won your debate with me. There are some things, maybe not all things in the realm of morality, but there
Right.
are some things that are objectively true statements. So I'd
Yes,
say
I
there are some objective morality things that I think is right to enforce legally and socially,
mhm,
like don't kill
right.
anyone, don't non-consensual almost anything.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it's kind of almost anything after non-consensual sounds like a thing that should be a morality that your personal morality doesn't get to overrule societies.
Right, agreed. And yeah, and obviously I think that for me that entails uh consent in a sense of like I think you need to be old enough and mentally is
Yeah,
it cognizant enough, like
you
all
need to
the
be
standards.
capable of giving consent. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That's I just wanted to add that caveat in there because we all, unfortunately, you and I both grew up in a time where if you're a 13-year-old boy and you had sex with a 24-year-old teacher, where we've definitely would have heard guys say, "Oh, what luckiest kid in the world," and like so, like when I say consent, I mean it in a hard and I'm not sure that I'm convinced, even though like I know the age of consent legally is one thing. I like, for example, if I was single, I think that I'm too old to have sex with an 18-year-old anymore. Like from a consent standpoint, I just don't see that that's a I think that's an
it's
arbitrary line. I get we have to draw an arbitrary line, but it's not we didn't draw the line at where your brain development stops. So like I
yeah,
think there's all
I
kinds of
I think
things.
it's hard when you start being able to give consent. Power relationships is part of that equation, and it's hard to think
Absolutely.
of an equation where someone in their 40s or 50s and someone in their teens have
Yeah.
an equal enough power footing where the person in their teens can make a proper consent.
Right. Just to be clear, I'm not in my 40s or 50s, but I just want to make that clear because I get a lot of shit at work
I thought
and
we were
at
about the
home.
same age. I thought we
Yeah.
were the same age.
Yeah, that's what people at work think. Uh,
I
No,
shave now. I look young. I got my gray's all gone because I shaved.
speaking of shaving, sorry to get off topic, but I'm going to be shaving I'm going to be getting a haircut, and because this weekend I'm going to Miami on a guy's trip, and we're going to be doing some fan boat shit, and so I'm going to be getting a mullet, and I'm getting a Fu Manchu for the weekend.
I love that. And what's funny is the reason I shaved was because when I was in Paris, our last night, the celebration dinner was disco night, and we had to look disco. And in my head, that's Travolta, and Studio 54. And you either need in disco a real long beard like the Bee Gees or no beard, you
Yeah,
know. And so I shaved because it was disco night and freaked everybody out. Like people like didn't recognize me, so I came down, my hair slicked back and clean shaven. And then I
nice,
video chatted my wife later, and like 10 minutes into the conversation, she realized it and started screaming at me.
nice. So she was morality shaming you for your beard.
No, she was age shaming. It was ageism with her because she
Oh,
says that I look much younger without my beard because, as we established previous conversation, I have a lot of gray in my beard. I only have a little gray at my temples and my hair. So without my beard, I dropped 10 years, and she feels like she looks younger standing next to me when I have a gray beard.
nice.
When I
Yeah.
look young, she doesn't necessarily look younger anymore.
Anyway, back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, so I think the entire culture wars like revolves around that, right? About I want to tell you what your moral should be to make me
yeah,
happy.
I agree. I think that there are a couple of these culture war items that I think, if we're being honest about, do fall into at least potentially, or I can understand the viewpoint of they affect others. We'll use guns as an example. Guns, like in theory, you should be able to own guns if you're like, but like, and be able to go play with guns. And I would have no problem if you're going to a target, going to a shooting range.
Range.
You could tell I'm
Yeah.
not a gun guy. Uh, You're going to a target practice. No, yeah. um, but like you're going, there's that. In that way, I think that guns kind of do become a like freedom. I can see that side of it, like where I want the freedom to do this, but then it does enter in to the like, well, how does this affect the greater good of society? How do we deal with that side of things? So I think, and I think it's a big, culture war topic, as much as anything else is almost. um and I think that there is, well, you and I are pretty closely aligned, I think, on that. There is to me, I can see the pro argument, the pro gun argument, more than I can, for example, the anti-gay argument.
Yeah. I think that that's true on the highest level.
Hmm.
But when the argument is I shouldn't have to obey any safety rules.
Hmm.
Anyone who wants a gun, even if they've murdered 3 people yesterday, should be able to buy a gun with no background check. That's when it's no longer about your right to have a gun. It's about
No,
your right to have a small penis and counter that by buying a lot of guns.
no, and I agree with you completely on that. My point being, like,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me, that is no longer the same more morality imposition, morality policing question as, for example,
Yeah.
gay. To me, any gay rights for adults, consenting adults, and for, honestly, like, if gay rights in general, like, because I, teenagers and gay, people have romantic and sexual desires and feelings early on. Whether or not you're allowed to express those and how so, that's a different question. But being
Hmm.
straight, being
And,
gay,
and
that's
and gender issues can go into childhood.
agreed.
Yeah,
Well,
so
yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
read some stuff that said that your gender identity is decided by the time you're about 2 or 3, whether or not you've figured it out, based on there's some strong, like, hard science, not just social science. I know that, like, you and
Hmm.
I wouldn't, we would think social science is legitimate, but there's some, like, biochemistry science that points to a lot of these aspects of gender identity being decided on a biological standpoint, as far as um not neurons. Why am I thinking, like, the
Yeah, well, I mean, they
neurological?
definitely. have brain scans that
Yeah,
show that trans men have brain scans that are more similar to men than they are to cis
right.
men than they are to cis women.
Yeah,
Cis women have more similar brain scans I mean,
exactly.
trans women have more similar scans to cis women than they do to
Yeah,
cis men. So
and
yeah, there
all
is
of that,
definitely hard biological science behind
right.
gender.
And that biological science, from what I from the way I understood it as when I read that, was that those aspects are basically settled by the time they start in utero, and then they go until you're about 2 or 3, I think I read. It's been a while.
Hmm.
I do have I'll put a couple of sources on today, because there's one source
Yeah.
that I really love, that has a great Forrest Valkai, you know who that is?
It was the opera guy from the March of the Valkyries.
No.
Dun, 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 dun,
No.
dun, 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 dun.
No, no, there's
No.
he's been on Atheist Experience and stuff, but he's a scientist. Forgetting what kind of science specifically. I want to say biologist, but I could be wrong. But he has a breakdown of the science of gender that I think is really good. So I'll put that on there so people don't think I'm talking out of my asshole.
Yeah. So
Um,
for worthless anecdotal, I have friends whose child at 9 decided that they wanted to be seen as the opposite gender as they had been treated their whole lives previously. But ever since she was 2 or 3, she wanted to wear girls' clothes, like girl shirts, like glittery shirts and low cut shirts. And her mom would always say, her mom was very progressive and would say, do you feel like you're a girl? Do you feel like you should be a girl like your sister? And she would always say, no, no, I'm a boy. I'm a boy. I just like this shirt. At, at 3, 5, 7, at 9, it was actually, I'm a girl. So
yeah,
like, yeah, her whole life she just didn't have the sophistication to realize it was a gender issue, not just a clothing issue. I
right.
mean, and she is, what is she now? Like, it was pre-pandemic, so she's at least 12 now. So, and her mind has not changed as the people who are on the other side of the culture war say they'll change their minds. That doesn't
Yeah,
seem to be the case.
yeah,
But, but yeah, so I go, no, nobody needs to be telling outside of their family what um, that child, who I won't name because she's still a minor, has a right to do, because
yeah,
their religion doesn't like it, or they don't like it because it's icky to them, or they don't understand it. Because frankly, I don't 100% understand trans stuff. I don't feel like a man. I just feel like me. So
yeah,
I don't fully understand what it means to feel like a different gender. But I imagine in my head, it's like I don't know what it's like to breathe air. I just do it. But if you put me underwater, I certainly know what it's like not to be breathing the right air. So I
yeah.
assume if I was in the wrong gender, I would know it the same way.
I think that, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and speak out of my ass because I'm a white guy, but I think that though I feel the same way about gender that you just said. I don't feel like a man. I just feel like me. But I think that that's partly being because we are not trans. We're not
Yeah, I agree,
stuck in a
100%.
situation. And then B, I also think it's being the thing that society sees to some extent as default. We're white men. We're the
Hmm.
default. And I don't mean that in a like default way. I mean that in like a that's unfortunately the facts of the case is, if in most novels, if they don't give a description of a character, you think white guy, or they're meaning white guy.
Yeah, you don't need a
And
novel, just the news, right? If
yeah,
it's a black guy, they say black guy. If it's a white guy, they just say a man.
yeah, exactly. So I think being the default does give us to the point where I think being the default, you don't feel like it. You're not meant to feel othered, or just outside of what's considered the standard. Um, and so I think that's part of that issue for me. But I I do want to push back on one thing that you said, though, which is you said outside of your family. I don't think it's for anybody to say I agree with you, but I also think, because I've seen enough of these documentaries about conversion therapies and people who want their kids to be straight or cis or whatever, and I think unfortunately I don't know how you deal with it. I don't know how you address that kind of a systemic issue where it's like, okay, these parents are homophobic. you got to have the right to freedom of religion and all, and thought and everything else. But at the same time, where do we draw the line on it? And it's tough because there, I mean, people are dying. Like there's kids that are dying from suicide, from depression, because they're and maybe it's a lot less now. I hope it's a lot less than it used to be. But like people who've been in homophobic households and transphobic households, and I think it becomes a different, to me, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with you. I shouldn't have said that. That I was wrong. Yeah,
I didn't mean
it's
it. I
only
know. Yeah,
no.
yeah.
You're 100%. You're 100% right. I kind of said that just as the turn of phrase that's normal
Mhm.
for moral issues and how you teach morality in your family. But I think that might be one of those absolute morality things. Judging someone else's
Yeah,
gender expression and sexual orientation is negatively judging that is immoral, regardless of whether you are a stranger or their parent. That
right.
people have every individual has the autonomy to be what they are.
Actually, it kind of brings up something interesting that I think we should talk about, which is, we're talking about morality. You and I discussed this ahead of time, but also we're talking about morality that we say does no harm. Like, pushing a morality, so we're saying gay people, like being gay doesn't hurt anybody. Being transgender shouldn't hurt any. It does. It can. Like, there's a lot of problems in our society for transgender people, but them being transgender doesn't hurt me, for example. Like, doesn't hurt someone outside of themselves necessarily. And so I think that there's that aspect, but then I kind of think the idea of, especially families and people pushing your morality against it can be harmful. And that's where I think it's like, so yeah, we'll use we'll call person A is gay, and their parent is gay, is homophobic. Person A has done nothing immoral by being gay. And so to have a morality against that, like, I don't care one way or the other what you mentally think, but to behave against that does become a harmful thing. So like us talking about that person, we are not talking about a person who just has uh a harmless opinion at that point. And I think that's something that the people who are bigoted or homophobic or slut shamey or whatever tend to try to like equate those two things, like being gay and being homophobic, as well. They're doing the same amount of harm. They're doing, and it's just not true. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, they have a big victim mentality often that,
Yeah.
and so they'll say it's hurting me that my grandchild is gay. I'll
Mhm.
never have grandchildren, great grandchildren, or they're I think they're going to go to hell, and so it hurts me. So they do take it as a physical. I mean, and it can be traumatic for them. I imagine it actually can be
Yes.
painful for them. But I don't. I think when you're going to judge morality of it, it's doing more damage to the person who is the grandchild in this case. Telling them to suppress who they are is more damage than the grandparent um, having some being upset.
Yeah. I just kind of think that this idea of, I don't disagree with you that, like, if you think someone's going to hell for something, that can be hurtful to you, and I get that. I don't exactly know how to deal with that either. Well, in a short term,
Well,
I kind of know in a long term, we just like educate people, so But
well, I mean, I think that there are times that you're going to have two, moral conflicts occur where there's two different things, and it's
true.
like I mean the trolley problems, right? There's not one is more moral than the other. It's what's your decision on which is more moral. So, and the thing
Yeah,
is, it's like say being an atheist or being gay, whatever, and it will hurt grandma if grandma knows. Do you have to have a conversation with grandma about it, or can you keep it to yourself? And that's, I think, a personal decision for the person saying, you know what,
hmm,
my grandma doesn't ever need to know my beliefs or or
yeah,
who I really am. I can make grandma happy, and it makes me happy that grandma's happy, even if grandma's wrong.
yeah,
Or you can say, you know what, I have to be my honest self because it hurts me not to be myself. even if it
Yeah.
hurts grandma. And I don't think either of those is a wrong feeling. I think it's whichever one is right for you, because there are some cases where there is life is not clean. It's not, not digital, not 0 and 1. There's issues.
Right. That's true. I also think so. I know a decent amount of people in my life that I would say are they have a different more moral structure than I do that I think are pretty good people who don't act on it. So, um, the best example is and I think she'll hate it if I mention her, but I'm hoping she's not listening to the podcast anyway. But my mom now is not. This doesn't apply to now. This is from 20 years ago or more. But but my mom was very in her head homophobic, I think, for a long time because the Bible and all the stuff she was taught. She was never
Did she stone
she was
people to death
never
for being gay?
no, she just thought it was immorality. She would but she was such a compassionate person that she would try to justify it in these like weird backbendy ways of like, well, homosexuality is not the problem, it's behaving on homosexuality. So you can have the thoughts but don't do the thing. And so that was the initial backbend of trying to be a compassionate person. And then eventually she learned a lot, and like she learned she read about bunch of different things, and then she was pretty early on being like, well, I don't think people are not born that way, and so like it's ridiculous. And I think I would say that like she's probably zero, well, for a straight person of her age group and everything else, she's as close to zero as she's going to get homophobic. And like I said, she was always compassionate. She was never. I guess you can be prejudiced and not act bigoted, if that makes sense. I don't know if that
Well, I
does.
think we all have ingrained stereotypes and prejudices because of the society we live in, and the what your eternal goal should be is to overcome those and not
Absolutely.
act on them, and change your own thoughts as you can. But it's not as easy as throwing a switch. So your
Yeah.
mother doing it over decades is admirable because it's
Right.
not something you can just choose.
Yeah. That's true. That is very true. I agree with that. And my dad was always really clear on he wanted us to be better than he was, and he didn't. He said, at one point I remember him having a conversation about bigotry. I don't remember exactly all of the finer points of it, but he said something along the lines of there is a group that I don't really care for he's like, because of the time and place that I grew up in. And he goes, it's the only time I ever heard him talk bad about a specific group. And it was more about like, and that's on me and I don't want you to learn it. And and it never happened again. And I remember him being really clear about, you know, that my dad was the first adult that I knew that had like I met gay people through my dad because he had coworkers that were gay, and it came up naturally. And my dad was, I mean, keep in mind my he's now 60, he's almost 64 years old, so he in the 90s he's like late 30s.
So I'm closer to your dad's age than I am yours. I should be hanging out with your dad.
Yeah, I I don't think my dad would like you though.
Because I now I know what type of people it is he doesn't like.
No, my dad's half Jewish, so
I know.
he does. I don't want to say what type of people because I don't want to like start that, but but he I remember like like it would be very easy for my dad, but given his age and you know all the other factors for him to be homophobic, and I remember it literally never being an issue. Like he had, he worked with this guy that he worked with was probably his favorite person at that job. Um, that guy came over a couple times and like for dinner, and like he was one of the people my dad was friendliest with. It was very clear that my dad was aware that he was gay. I mean, I grew up in Massachusetts, so while my family is relatively conservative, the people around us weren't, and so like they weren't nearly as closeted. By the time I was graduating high school, gay marriage was legalizing in Massachusetts or was about to legalize. So like So a lot of ways we were ahead of the curve, but also my dad would have been a product of his time still to have been homophobic, and I never remember that. Um, the point I was getting at was that he and my mom were always very clear on, like, just because we think something, like, we want you to be better. We know this isn't a great way of thinking. It's ingrained in us, and we're probably not going to get over it, but we're not going to pass it on. And I think that if we can handle our own, not just prejudices, but like, I mean, okay, we keep making reference to slut shaming. Slut shaming is,
We? No, that's you. I don't make reference to that.
well,
You're the one
maybe.
calling people sluts. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I did. I saw a stand up the other day where the guy was talking about slut shaming, and he goes, calling it slut shaming feels really judgy though, because then it's like, well, then the behavior you're referring to the person shaming, you're calling that slutty.
Okay,
But
we all agree that she's a slut. Don't shame her for it.
exactly, that's what his point was. But as far as slut shaming, like, I think, like, that's one of the things that has my generation, I think, still has struggled with. I see it in not my friends so much, but friends of friends and stuff, where you go and you see somebody just start talking shit about girls, like, about, I don't know, like wearing skimpy outfits, or I don't know if skimpy is even like the right word, but like wearing revealing outfits. And and w- it is it's up until, like, literally up until the Me Too movement, and it's kind of amazing because what Me Too movement was like, what, 2017,
Sure.
we'll say that. I think that it's amazing how much of it was going on that I wasn't realizing, that I look back on now. Like like I knew obviously the more egregious terrible shit, but like Sarah likes this show called Below Deck. It's a reality show about a bunch of people working on a yacht. And it started in like 2011 or 2012. And if you watch that show, the first 4 or 5 seasons, any woman that like sleeps with somebody on that show is going to get like hardcore shit. And I just kept thinking, like, didn't this take place after the Me Too movement? And then it's like, no, it's like immediately before it. And it's so insane how, like, I don't know, like, oh well, she slept with someone, so she's dead to everybody. Like, and it's amazing to that's one of the more recent thing. I mean, homophobia has been on a resurgence. I know that it never went away fully. Transphobia obviously has, like, its own, transphobia has taken off, like, in the last few years, like,
It's
in a
very
way.
popular.
Unfortunately, that is not an inaccurate statement. um but like, I think that the reason I mentioned slut shaming is I think that it is a thing we don't talk about the way we talk about with other stuff. Like, we've always, as a society, that, as far as I am aware, have always been pretty intense on it, and it hasn't let up the same way. Like, it hasn't let up within liberal circles the way, liberals 30, 40 years ago were probably fairly transphobic. Even maybe 20 years ago. Like, Jon Stewart had a video where he said something about making shitty penis jokes is my bread and butter. And yes, I got it wrong sometimes. And, like, there's all these, like, these things that I think we've moved forward, even if only half of us have moved forward on that we, there's this
It's a
other.
conversation now. It wasn't even a conversation then.
Right, and I think well, we're better about believing victims, and maybe we don't blame victims the same way as far as sexual assault and stuff. I don't know that we've adjusted our attitudes as far as the way we handle women who own their sexuality, or who we perceive owning their sexuality.
Yeah, so this is one of the things I hate about my parents, where my parents really sucked as parents, is that my parents were hippies, in the hippie days, and they were right on almost every issue,
Hmm.
to the point like shaming people for being sex positive did not exist in my life. Like when I was uh, 18 and a girlfriend of mine from Philly was visiting, and I was like, "Where should I put her bags?" My dad was like, well, my mom was like, "In your room, where else?"
Yeah.
I'm like, she had no issues with it, and like there wasn't anything negative about my girlfriend that she was gonna spend the time with me, and so I never had a negative thing about it. Like it was never, and I know friends did. I grew up in Brooklyn, so I know friends talked shit about people, but it was never a thought in my head that somebody wanting to do the same thing that I wanted to do was bad for them and good for me. So I hate that I don't have all the good
You hate that you don't have the
baggage.
trauma and the baggage
Yeah.
and the
And
unpacking to do.
I don't have the stories about, oh no, it's Thanksgiving. I have to go talk to my parents who voted for Elizabeth Warren. I mean, it's like,
Yeah. No, I get. I mean, I genuinely I say this, and I know that I've talked about my family being conservative. I think for the most part my family is a lot more compassionate than and good-hearted than we like to think of conservative people, us on the left. And I give the example, I used it today. When Sarah's mother died, we're all liberals on Sarah's side of the family, and and everyone other than you, everyone else that was like really compassionate and helped us and did things for us during that period of time had the exact opposite political views, and a lot of the opposite morality views, and a lot of the, and definitely opposite like religious views than some of us. And yet they were there for us. They were good people that just believed things opposite from us. So I know that like I probably sound like I'm making excuses, but that has been my experience, that they are good people. I've seen a lot of my conservative family behave in ways that I wouldn't associate with the conservatives that we think of now. So like, so I don't, when I say that all that stuff, I'm not like really like bitching. Like I do have an uncle that likes to argue, but like ultimately, I said this before, but I think I cut it out because it was the bigger conversation got cut out. But I have an uncle who it took me a long time to realize that he likes arguing for the sport and that it's not personal. And so like I would I would be getting like very angry, and he would just, he's a lawyer, and he just is a, he appreciates the back and forth. And so for him, it's just an exercise. And for me, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And I get upset. And then finally, when I learned that, we've had like, I realized, oh, like he's never said, he doesn't say anything like vitriolic or
ad hominems.
I mean, I don't agree with the way he argues necessarily, like, but I don't think he's not just trying to hurt me the way that like some people, when you're arguing with them, he's just trying,
Hmm.
sometimes he's trying to make his point.
But like Boy George sometimes just wanted to hurt.
Yeah. So you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think a lot of times people right leaning doesn't be far conservative, because we're talking huge different,
yeah,
tense, right? What they do in their personal life is just different what they believe their government should do. Like people who give tons to charity and are
yeah,
very loving, then say, but I don't want my tax dollars to go to charity.
right, right,
So it's not always a bad person. It's just a
yeah,
different, not realizing that, the government has a lot more spending power and could do a lot more than you throwing a dollar into a
yeah,
basket does.
yeah, absolutely. I just want you to think like every time I go to a family event, or like that I have
Yeah.
all this baggage. I
You,
have
yeah, you have all the
baggage.
fun.
I have different baggage than I think the average like liberal from a conservative family has. I have the religious baggage to some degree,
Yeah.
but
So, so let me get canceled. I'll get canceled now. So when
yes.
when when my daughter was, I don't know, as we said in Brooklyn, 2, 3 years old, right? Um, when she was young, somebody made she was cute as a button, and someone at work made the comment like over lunch that, oh, you'll have to get a shotgun when she gets dating age. And
Mhm.
my response was, the age of consent is 16 in North Carolina. If she wants to have sex when she's 16, there is nothing I can do to stop her. It's her body, it's her choice. I hope that we raise her to make good enough choices that she's not going to put herself in a position where she's in danger or she's being hurt. But if she chooses to sleep with 30 guys because she enjoys that, that's her business. And they were like, "Oh, you'll change your mind when she's older," and you're crazy to say that. I'm like, even if I didn't feel that way, it's still the truth. She's sick when she's 16. She's legal in North Carolina to do whatever the hell she wants, and it's my job to make sure she's safe when she does it. You want to bring a guy home? I'd rather you bring him home than be in the back of a car on a construction site,
Yeah.
out in public because you're afraid to come home.
Yeah.
And then she's 20 now, and she is drop dead gorgeous, and she is super smart, and she is super political and and confident. And what she does in her spare time is her business, just like I thought it would be when she was a toddler.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think 16 should be the age of consent, but I agree with the idea of what you
But it
said.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I
funny because people all the time say think 18 is. I'm like, I mean, I was in a fraternity, so we had to know to make sure we were safe. Especially because there was a school in Raleigh that was a junior college that was junior and senior high school and freshman and sophomore college kind of thing.
That's fucked
So
up.
having a school ID from that school did not tell you how old the person was.
Yeah.
So we were very aware of the ages and the rules. Like, and basically wouldn't let anyone under 16 into our house, so that no matter what happened, nobody
Yeah.
got in trouble. Um, but but it's different in every state. And some states have complicated rules. Like if you're 16, you can be with someone under 21, but not someone over 21. You have to be 18 to be with over. There's lots
Yeah.
of complicated rules out there. People just think 18 because that's what they say on TV, and they forget
Yeah.
that we're the United States. We're not America. We have different rules for everything everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean I was sexually active when I was 16, and I don't think, but
Good for
not with
you.
people. I never was with a girl more than 6 months younger than me, so I was never in a power situation. It was. I mean, usually I was the less experienced person because I'm a klutz. I was like, "We're doing what? Oh, we're doing this! Yay!" Um, but and I don't think either of us were damaged. Either me or any of my partners were damaged by being that age. But again, we weren't forcing ourselves into it. And we were all hippie liberals or raised probably in very sex positive environments very with it, where it wasn't like acting out or being crazy. It was being
Yeah.
raised where you can make a rational decision.
I was just, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you, I was sexually active at 13. It may have been 12 a couple weeks before my 13th birthday, but I was sexually active that early. And then I was sexually active with partners at 19, with a partner at 19. I didn't have multiple partners. I don't want like people to think like I was like right out the gate, just like orgies.
Orgy.
No, it took a few months. Um, but no, yeah, I agree with you. I will say also back to your comments on your daughter. I A lot of my morality things that I have, I swear like crazy. I don't think swearing is immoral, and I've been told on all kinds of occasions, well, you'll feel different when you have a child because you won't want them to embarrass you,
Hmm.
and and people used to say that to
What a
me,
weird
and
reason. You don't want them to embarrass you. That's the weirdest reason I've ever heard not
yeah,
to
and
use
that's it.
profanity.
Yeah. Well, and well, they don't want you don't want them to people to think you're a bad parent, basically, and be embarrassed for that reason. And and so I don't see, I back to the seven words. I don't see because I grew up on George Carlin. I don't see the
No such thing as
immorality,
bad words, just bad
bad
thoughts and
thoughts.
bad
Yeah.
intentions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up with that, so I didn't have that thought, and people would be like, "You're gonna change your mind. You're gonna change your mind," and I'd get in arguments about it, and they're like, "You'll see," because and even people younger than me used to do it, and I will say that Logan has been swearing for years now. We have to figure out. We have to explain to him. Okay, just because you
Yeah.
can swear doesn't mean you can swear all the time. It doesn't mean you can swear in any way. It just means you can swear, and he's pretty good. Like we haven't he's 6 years old. He's been in daycare or school for 5 years almost. He'll be
Hmm.
7, and he's been in school almost 6 years. Um, he we've never been spoken to that that he swore or anything else. Now, by a teacher or a daycare person, we've been spoken to by sisters-in-law and fathers-in-law and stuff like that. But ultimately, we have not been spoken to otherwise. But like now, our concern is like he loves to talk about dicks and balls, and he
Oh
talks
yeah.
about dicks and balls. And it's like, okay, well, you can talk about those with us, but you can't say that all the time because people might construe that as sexual. Like we can't tell them sexual harassment, but we, but the swearing thing, I remember people talking to me about it and saying, "Oh, you're not going to want." And it's like, why? What is the difference? Like, I honestly, it upsets me when you say fudge instead of fuck. Like if I see a kid, I'm like, no, you think you found a loophole, and that is being dishonest and swearing. And to me,
Yeah.
if you just say oh fuck instead of oh fudge, you're not being dishonest. You're being honest with how you feel about that.
Yeah, my kids were around profanity their whole lives because they're my kids, and the rule was there were two rules about it. The
Mhm.
first was you don't do it outside of the house, because you're a school, you're not allowed to use those words. You're allowed to use them at home, you're not allowed to use them at school. There's different rules, just like you can run at home and you can't run around school.
Yeah.
There's just different rules. And the second was you can't use them at people. So you can say fuck this, we can't say fuck you. Like we
Mhm.
don't, we didn't curse each other in the house. You don't use curses at people, like they were adjectives, not attacks. Until they were old. I mean, they're old enough to decide. Once they're old enough to do it, they're old enough to do it. But we didn't want 3, 4, 5 year old saying fuck you to a classmate.
I
We
agree.
got in trouble one time when Joseph was in middle school. And when I talked to the principal about it, I was like, listen, this kid has been harassing Joseph, shoving Joseph. Joseph lost his temper and cursed him. The alternative was Joseph would have punched him in his face, and Joseph's taken martial arts class. Joseph probably would have won a fight with him. Would you rather he hit him? And this stupid bitch said, yes, that's better than using profanity. And I said, you are fucking insane, woman. She was not happy with me. I was like, I will tell him to kick the shit out of the kid next time. And then I don't want to get a call. I don't want to find out he did it until he gets home and brags
Well,
about it because you just told me you want him to do it.
yeah, absolutely. I will say so. Logan, he's not supposed to swear at people, but he has on occasion. He called a kid a dick that was over our house that had locked him out of his room. And this is
Oh, that's fair.
one of our good friends' kids. And we had that moment of we heard from upstairs. We were all downstairs hanging out, and we heard the kids upstairs, and we heard Logan go, "Let me in my room, you dick!" And we were like, "Oh shit!" And we looked at each other, and we were like, "Sorry." And they were like, "Well, is our kid being a dick?" Like,
Yeah, yeah. I thought it would have been my response.
yeah. And then the other example is that so Logan, we when Logan was like 2, we got a dog, and him and the dog have a real brother sister relationship where they like constantly are at each other. Like the dog thinks he's a dog, like tries to steal his food, like just treats him like a sibling. And so sometimes the dog bites him or he hurts the dog, and when the dog bites him, like nips at him because he was doing something wrong, or just because the dog thinks he's doing something wrong, I just told him, just when he's crying, I'm just like, say fuck you, Gally. And he does, and it makes him smile. So
Yeah, dogs aren't people.
yeah.
But you did it, man. You brought our morality conversation back to the 7 words you can't say on television.
Yeah.
You
Well,
100% did it.
Logan does not know all the 7 words you can't say on television. Luckily, I have
Yeah.
not. As far as I know, he does not know the C bomb. But
He's
he
not into British comedy.
no.
Yeah, it's funny. My 24-year-old says it's really tough for him sometimes not to use the C word because he watches British comedy all the time, and it's like saying ass there. It's just a mild curse. They use it all the time. And
Yeah,
he's like, it's hard to remember that it's not that way here.
right. And it's a lot more loaded with us. Like there they'll call a guy that. And that's the
Yeah,
other part of it is like
it's just a word.
it's not a gendered term there.
Yeah, it's not saying you're inferior because you're a woman's sexual organ.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a friend of mine was getting the mail from like like central mailbox area for a bunch of townhouses,
Yeah.
and her son, who was like 6 years old maybe, is sitting there next to her. She's got the mail, and he goes out of nowhere, "Fuck you, asshole!" Just deadpan. And she whips around. What did you say? And she looks. He looks her in the eye, and he goes, "Fuck you, asshole." She goes, "What? Why would you say that?" And he points, and someone in Sharpie had written it on the side of the mailboxes. And
Nice.
and then he goes, realizes her response. She goes, "Mommy, are those bad words?" And she said, "Yeah, those are bad words." I don't want to. I didn't mean to do bad words. It's okay. You didn't know, but those are bad words. Don't use those words. Okay. They start walking back to the house, and she suddenly realizes he's not next to her. She turns around. He's like 10 feet behind her, standing and crying. And she's like, "What's wrong?" He goes, "Mom, did I just say the F word?" Because he knew there was an F word, but he didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And she's
Lo-
like, "Yes, you did." And he was hysterical, crying, "I'm sorry, mommy, I love you. I didn't mean to say an F word at you."
that's hilarious. Logan. So Logan is not aware of what the N word is. He's heard the term the N word, but he doesn't know. And I listen to rap music. He's heard the N word. He just doesn't know it. Um, but he's unaware of what the word is. But uh, I want to say it was after the George Floyd. It was like it wasn't the George Floyd stuff. It was something after. But one of the big protests or big things that was on the news, we had watched the news and we shielded him from it somewhat, but we explained some of it too, like because we don't want him to be oblivious to it, but that doesn't mean he needs to be exposed to all of it, right? And they said the term the N word on TV, and he goes, and this is before he could spell anything. So he goes, "What's the N word?" And I was like, "It's the worst word you can say. I'm not going to tell you." And he goes, "Is it fuck?" And I was like, "Nope, it's not." And then like
It's awesome.
he wanted to know for a long time, and then like a year goes by, and we're watching something else because unfortunately, there's a lot of racial issues still going on. So we have to. So it's still part of our news lexicon. They said the N word again, and he goes, "What's the?" This was a year later. He didn't remember the original interaction. He goes, "What's the N word?" And this point, he's spelling, and I was like, "I'm not going to tell you. It's the worst word you can say, so I'm not going to tell you." I said, "Eventually, you're going to learn it, and when you learn it, you probably are going to say it because you won't know yet. And then when you say it in front of me, and hopefully, I get to be the first person to hear you, so I can shut that down quickly." I said, "But what when you hear it, we'll deal with it." And then he goes, "Is it no?" And I was like, "Well, a lot of people hate to hear that word as well." Um, but
So when I directed improv in the 90s, the early 90s, the phrase the N word was not as popular. Like it
yeah,
wasn't like I mean, it was used, but you didn't hear it and automatically think there's only one way in the world you'd ever say that phrase, right? It just wasn't so prevalent. And probably because people said the other word instead.
yeah,
Um, and we had an improv game, which is a typical improv game. Any improv person or many actors who've done any improv exercise have done, where you do a scene and both people can only do sentences of 4 word length as you go back and forth. And it's a way to keep you out of your head so you can't plan the whole scene ahead because you don't know what your partner is going to say because they're stuck by this constraint of having to say 4 words. So they have to listen closely to what you say and back and forth. And if 4 words becomes too easy after a while because you becomes a pattern. So we used to rotate it and say, well, we'll do something between 2 and 8. So we'll just pick 2 random numbers and or whatever and do it. So we named the game N word because it was an N amount of words in the sentence. And we called it that for years until somebody one time joined my group like 10 years later and was looking through my list of games and said, "Wait, you have a game called N word? How the hell do you play that?" I'm
yeah,
like, maybe I should change it to variable word.
yeah, yeah. That's the problem with being a math nerd is that you know about the N,
Yeah. I mean, I worked in
factor.
pharma forever, so we had dealt with clinical trials with the amount of people in a study is capital N is how many people, N equals 2035. That's how many people were in the study. And then lowercase n is a branch in the study, how many people were in the
Okay.
placebo versus, drug group. And it became a common phrase in work. Like if you're like the only person with an opinion to refer to someone as, or the only person doing a job, that you're an N of one. Like we said it all the time. And I would say it online, like on AOL back in the old days. People say, "What the hell do you mean?" And I'm like, it's jargon where I work, and I forgot that not everyone uses that term. It's such a normal term to me.
Oh yeah. Oh, that would be a great topic, by the way. Just words or just the idea of jargon that we all get into because Sarah and I do it with all kinds of shit because of being parents. And our jargon would be different than other parents because I'll give you the best example is Capri Suns. We call them puppy juice because there was Paw Patrol puppies on it the first time we bought them for Logan. So
Uh-huh.
we get to that point where
Weak.
it's like I'll be like, "Oh, I Sarah wants me to go get puppy juice on the way home," and people are like, "She wants you to get puppy juice?" Like, I just think that'd be a fun topic.
I had a friend in Brooklyn. His parents were more religious Jews than way more than he was, and obviously more than I am because zero. But they always had Sunny Delight in the house, so Madhavi and I took to calling it Jew juice because we had it at their house all the time.
Nice,
And like to this day, we're like, should we buy Jew juice? You want to get Jew juice?
nice. Give me that purple stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
Um,
The old Chappelle bit where he's talking about how there was always that one black kid in the Sunny D commercials. They're like, "Who wants? We got purple juice. We got purple stuff, and
uh,
and Sunny D." And he's like, and the black kid's always like, "Give me some of that purple stuff."
sugar water in the plastic container.
Yeah. Oh,
Yum. I used to do grape tang back when tang used to be orange and grape. Used to
yeah.
tang. And sometimes we'd mix them together. We'd call it mud because it'd be like
Gross.
brown.
Yeah. I thought for this week for an outro because we're not plugging shit, but I thought that I would just mention that I have been listening to a podcast. I've been listening to it for years, but I've gotten kind of back into it, and I thought I'd shout out a podcast and see if there's any podcasts you want to shout out today. So my podcast is more of a pop culture podcast, uh, but I've been listening a lot to the Cuffs Basement podcast. I was listening to it on my way home today, and they've been doing some really good episodes. That's been really getting me back into them. They've been going for years, 3 or 4 years now, but it's a good podcast.
I'll plug one of my things
Okay,
myself. Plug myself, damn it.
perfect.
Yeah. So sometimes when the mood hits me, um, one of my alternate personalities bubbles to the surface, and sometimes that personality is a, a Italian Jew from Brooklyn, born of the '80s, named CK, and CK has a YouTube channel called CK's Kitchen Channel, and neither I nor CK are a particularly good chef, but we make some interesting recipes. Um, with a side of fun. They're very funny, I think. One of CK's things is he uses a lot of malapropisms, and he's not very much of a perfectionist. So we intentionally leave editorial mistakes in. When I edit the video, I leave mistakes in, like background noises and talking on purpose, because that's what CK would do. And
I,
CK uses words improperly. So check out CK's Kitchen Channel for some fun recipes.
the CK's Kitchen channel has a lot of there's a lot of fun shit in there that you won't be able to find necessarily because it's just fun to me because I've known Matthew since before he started doing the channel. So for example, in any point in the show when he makes reference to washing his hands off camera, that is because on one of the episodes I was like, there's no visible cut and I didn't see you wash your hands after handling raw meat or something. And so in every single episode, it's been years because it started before the pandemic,
Uh-huh.
and I mentioned it one time because I'm a bit of a germaphobe, and I also get soup. Like if I ever have to cook a bunch with a bunch of raw meat, my hands look like dried out because I've washed them every single step before I hold the salt and pepper shakers. I'm so nuts about it, and now it just every time it makes me laugh because we'll watch your videos and it'll just be like, I washed
Lots
my
of scenes where
hands while in
I'm
between
turning, I'm
cuts.
coming from the sink intentionally in the edit so you can see that I wash
Yeah,
my hands.
I love, and Sarah laughs every time we watch them because of that, because every video we've watched since then there is some reference to, don't worry, I'm washing my hands, which
Yeah. And this last one, I made ziti bolognese, and I made it because Logan complained that I hadn't done a new video in so long. So it was
Mhm.
purely for Logan. And at the end, I called Logan out. I said I made a separate portion to bring over to the house for Logan.
Nice. Yeah, I there is a part of me that wants to make a cooking channel because I do a decent amount of cooking, but I'm like, I just haven't found the angle for it yet, and like I don't know that I want. If I could do it, I did have a. This is before I met you. I had an idea for a cooking YouTube channel that was going to be. It was going to be Alex Jones cooking, and it was going to be. I can't remember all of the things, but it was. We would cook like tinfoil hat chicken and like it was. I was just had like a bunch of like ideas for it, but I cook enough a lot of the time Sarah and I will do something that is kind of a recipe we had once and we're trying to recreate it, or we're trying to remember, and we come up with something that we like better. And so a lot of my recipes, you'll be like, oh, that's like basically hamburger helper taco, thing, but it's our version. And so I'm like, I don't know if I can do a YouTube channel based on that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, not like I create recipes from scratch. Like some of them are direct lifts from this is from my favorite cookbook, and
Yeah.
so I'm going to do a video about it because I know that you can't copyright a recipe. You can only copyright the words around the recipe. That's creative writing. The recipe itself is not copyrightable.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's why everyone has a whole story with that. One of the reasons, besides SEO, but even in cookbooks, why there's always a paragraph about Aunt Lil and all this, stuff around it, is because that part you can copyright, but you can't copyright 1 cup sugar or 1 cup water. That's not copyrightable.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah,
All right.
and that's why they have to keep the 11 herbs and spices super secret
Oh
because
yeah.
they can't. If they published it, anyone can use it because it's not. You can't protect it. You can
Oh
patent some things like that sometimes in techniques, but you can't copyright the cookbook
yeah.
recipe. You can take someone else's recipe and repeat it verbatim as long as you're not keeping the fun story around it.
Oh, that's interesting. Cool.
But again, at the same time, I don't do any videos for where if I'm doing the same thing someone else did. Like unless
Yeah.
I'm doing a little something different, I'm always like, check out the real video from Jeff at Pressure Luck because he does it right. I made 10 changes, so if you want to learn how to do it right, do his version.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
And my goal, speaking of Jeff, is to be on his Pressure Luck video. We have struck up a friendship on social media, and he's a big fan of CK's character. So one day when I can travel to New York, maybe CK will do a visit, and he gets millions of views.
Nice. That'd be awesome. Um, yeah. Oh, I did have one thing I wanted to say was for our listeners, we have an email that you should be hopefully emailing if you have comments or you want to tell Matthew how much you're canceling him over whatever cancelable thing he says. Um, but also, so our email is talking about the big stuff at gmail.com. One of the things that we would really like is if you have a good topic that you'd like us to talk about, or if you think that you would be a potential guest, a good guest for us to have on the podcast, we would love to hear about it, and obviously propose a topic for yourself. um but like I think in the next couple weeks we're going to be getting some guests on. I have a guest lined up. I don't have a topic lined up for her yet. We talked about conspiracy theories, and she was into that, but I was like, we just kind of did it last week, so I'm not sure I want to do that again so quickly. But so I have a guest. You talked about having uh Leah or Madavi on, right? Or did you just talk about Leah?
Either one potentially. They're both very big in activism, so I thought a conversation about how to become an activist for people who are sitting at home saying, "I wish I could change things, but I don't know what I could do."
Yeah.
They can give you some hardcore advice on what you can do to make a difference.
Yeah, I think that would be good. But I definitely want to get, even though I like, just shooting the shit with you, I do want to get us some guests
Yeah,
back on to some variety, especially because you and I have weighed into some really deep shit for two white guys to weigh into. So I would like to eventually be like,
mix
oh,
it up.
I mean, I feel like when before it was a guest, before you were a co-host, and I was just doing guests, trying to do every guest every week. I had a good variety of like, like of guests from different perspectives, and then you know
We agree too much.
we agree a lot, and we I mean the big thing, the big difference between us, the big thing that will give us any perspective difference, the two big things are, one is you are who you were raised as, basically, and I'm not anymore. I've like shifted quite a bit. And then the other thing is that we have a big age gap, and so like your generation is just going to have a different, like you went through different things than I did, just based on generational differences. But like it is interesting to get more diverse perspectives, and so I think we're going to have some guests. Also, now that we figured out this, we're using Zencaster. uh it's really fucking easy to have multiple people from all around the country as long as they have a good internet connection. And it was a pain in the ass when I was recording with my other friends that were not You, Sarah, Logan, and my friend Adam are the only episodes that have been recorded in the same room. Back to the point that I was getting to. If you would like to be a guest or you have a topic or anything else, please email us. And that's it for me. What do you got? Anything? Any last words? Words of wisdom?
The last words. Oh no, that wall.
Watch out for that tree.
Brandon Fraser's the best.
Yes, I'm very excited that he's coming back. It is. It is. Okay. We're gonna go on one more little tangent. Um, I know that it's like there's the idea of separating. I forget what they call it, the death of the artist or whatever, where they separate the art from the artist, and so you enjoy Woody Allen movies, and you do. I get it to some extent. I get it, but I also really like when people who seem like genuinely awesome people or nice people end up being the best in a field and like end up being like really successful. Like
It's nice to feel good about the art that you like.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like Brendan Fraser, like you watch him meeting with key.
You watch Encino Man, and you're like, what an artist, and then he turns out
Yeah,
he's a great guy.
yeah, exactly. No, you want a bit like it's nice. It's nice to know it's the year that Casey Affleck won. There was by the time they made it to the Oscars, there was some pretty intense allegations against him, and you're like, he's gonna win, and he had the best performance, but geez, hopefully, I really hope that Brendan Fraser is as good of a person as we all seem to think he is,
Yeah,
because
yeah. It's kind of like Bill Cosby was one of the top stand-ups ever, but I can't watch a routine without instantly thinking about what a shit he is, and I can't enjoy his comedy because I can't. It's not
yeah,
it's not a choice. I can't sit there and just let go and enjoy what he used to do well.
yep. All right.
All right. On that note, now we've shamed him.